This first person asks a question that I don't think I've been asked before, which is unusual. I thought I'd heard them all. He said, what do you say when somebody cuts in line in front of you? You don't say anything. You just pull your .45 and kill them. No. That's what you do in Texas. It depends on what it's worth to you. If I'm feeling happy and contented, I'm enjoying my life, I'm with Donna. If I'm in a line, I'm going to be with Donna. Anyway, what am I going to do? Go to the grocery store by myself? I'd get lost, and then I'd have to go to the lost and found, and they'd say, is anybody lost a 63-year-old man? Okay, that wasn't your question, was it? So I'm enjoying myself. I'm having a good conversation with her, and somebody cuts in line. How bad could it be? Is it even worth saying anything? Really? That's the real question. And people who would cut in line are usually the kind of people who, if you say, you realize you've cut in line, would not say, I didn't know that. Thank you for showing me the error of my ways. That's not usually the same group of people. They're usually combative. So talking to them is usually unproductive, because in the old days, I did speak to people who cut in line in front of me. I just made sure I was bigger than they were. But if you just can't stop yourself, which happens sometimes, somebody cuts in line and you've been waiting for a long time and you are going, you have got to be kidding me. You could say something like, excuse me, but you probably didn't realize that the end of the line is back there. I've watched that line used by little old ladies who didn't weigh 98 pounds. And because they said, you probably didn't realize, the person who cuts in front of them goes to the back of the line. Often people just make a mistake. I've done it. I've gotten what I thought was the back of the line, and it turns out that was just where the line kinked and turned. I wasn't at the back of the line. I didn't know. Doesn't mean that they're going to listen, but it's a thought. The biggest thing is you don't want to give up your happiness because somebody cut in front of you. It's just not worth it. A woman came here for an intervention. Drama queen. I mean, wow. There were tears and hysteria if anything happened that she didn't like. You know, bawling and crying and wailing, and her husband, of course, just loved this behavior. And the stress was literally killing her. Several years before, she had had awful stomach problems. And so she went in to get colonoscopy. And the surgeon came out after she woke up and said, lady, you got one of the worst cases. He must have gone to the, bedside manner school. He said, you got one of the worst cases of Crohn's disease I've ever seen. It's one of those inflammatory bowel diseases that make people miserable, and it increases your risk of cancer. And he said, your entire bowel is affected, and my bet would be that in 3 years you're going to be dead. I'd love to meet this guy. Now, whether he actually said that or that was the way she heard it, but she heard that in 3 years she'd probably be dead. She decided to do something about it. So she studied real love, for one thing. She did some other things too, but Crohn's disease doesn't go away because, you eat broccoli. She decided to get rid of the stress in her life, because everybody who studies inflammatory bowel disease recognizes that stress makes it far worse. And increasingly, there are many people who believe that it actually causes Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis or any one of the inflammatory bowel disorders. And when I saw her, I discovered that she had not had a repeat colonoscopy in some time because she was certain she was going to die. So it's odd reasoning, but she would rather not know that she was about to die. She'd rather just die. So she promised me she'd get a repeat colonoscopy, and she did recently, and called me, and she said, actually texted me. She said, results normal. She went from one of the worst cases that this colon surgeon had ever seen and a high likelihood that she'd be dead to normal. He said, I'll see you back in 10 years. No medication, no nothing. And I've seen this with a great many disorders like this. People who have autoimmune disorders, heart disease, chronic fatigue, it just goes on and on. Any disorder that can be caused by stress, which happens to be pretty much everything. She sent me an email after that. She said, I like my new life. I like being able to choose to be happy even when other people don't, even when my husband doesn't. I love telling the truth about myself, which I never would have imagined. Me either, because it used to be when she heard the truth about herself, she went into a crying fit and made everybody feel terrible. She said, I love being the designated driver with my girlfriends. Now that wouldn't make sense to you unless you knew that she used to be a pretty heavy drinker to the point of being probably an alcoholic. She said, I love doing responsible things. I think, in fact, I'm sure I love being loving. I'm loving being happy. Who knew? So here's somebody who learned how to love, and now they love their life and completely got rid of a disorder, a disease that was killing them. Stress is a big killer, both physically and emotionally. Here's a lady who writes to me and says, my boyfriend was divorced 4 years ago. And he has a young daughter. And we've been dating for a few months, and the daughter really likes me. She wants me to be around. She wants to plan vacations around my being there and that kind of thing. But we're not a for sure engaged, no kidding, going to be married couple yet for a number of reasons. So do I hold back from loving this kid because I don't want to hurt the kid's feelings? I don't want to get really close to the kid and then have it turn out that we're not going to be married, and then the kid's feelings get, kid's hopes get up, and then the kid's feelings get dashed. So what do I do? There's no kid that understands withholding love. Impossible. So what do you do with a kid? This is really easy. What do you do with ice cream? Eat it. What do you do with a kid? Love the kid. Every bit you have. Don't hold back. If the situation with the boyfriend doesn't work out, well, then he can explain it to her. She's going to have other disappointments in her life, possibly with your help. But why plan for a failure? And he'll still be there to love her. Will it hurt her if you leave? Yeah. And if we live not to hurt people, if that's our goal, not to hurt anybody, well, then we can't love them either. And we can't be happy. You can't get close enough to love somebody without the risk of hurting them. Memorize that. Impossible. I know uncounted people whose primary goal in life is not to be hurt or to diminish their pain. And not one of them is happy. So, love the kid. Love the kid's dad, too, and who knows what'll happen. This is a story about a kid and his father. So, teenage kid. Kid has a phone, a smartphone, which is the beginning of many terrible stories. Kid has phone. Oh. So the dad is suspicious about the way that the kid is handling the phone, looking at the phone, been texting on the phone. Just, there's something different about it. You know how you can tell if a kid has done something wrong, you know? They just act different. And so the dad holds his hand out and says, "Give me the phone." And the kid says, "There is confidential information on the phone from other people." That's really clever. This is the kid who's going to grow up to be a lawyer. "So I don't have any right to give you the phone." It's a clever kid. So he refuses. The dad insists, and the dad asks me what to do. I said, "Take the phone." Well, the kid, rather than give the dad the phone, runs away. The dad asked me what to do then. I said, "Well, how old's the kid?" 15. Easy. Call the police. The kid, they wouldn't justify possibly you shackling the kid to, the wall, but the kid's yours. The kid's a minor. So he called the police. The police went and found the kid. The kid refused to go home and hand over the phone. So the police said, "No problem, kid. As opposed to your dad, we don't really care." So they just hauled the kid to a detention center. They hauled the kid to jail, where they, surprise, took his phone. You can just see the police going, "You thought this was going to be complicated for us?" They got a great big guy from the South named Bubba who took his phone away from him. This is something kids need to understand. Parents need to understand this. Children have no legal right to privacy. Shocking. Actually, the right to privacy isn't even in the Constitution. But the right to free speech is, and there are a lot of other amendments that kind of imply it, and so we talk about it all the time, but it's not specifically named. But children have no right to privacy. So then what happens? So then the mother, who's the divorced from the dad, rescues the kid and threatens to sue for custody. So the dad's going, "Well, what do I do now?" Nothing. There's nothing you can do now. Now that mom's come to rescue the kid, oh yeah, I suppose you could go to court over it, and the kid would end up back with mom no matter what the court said anyway, because now that mom has supported the kid in being a brat, a spoiled, entitled brat, the kid's going to choose to be with mom all the time. And at 15, what are you going to do to stop him? Nail his feet to the floor? Now you have to go to the emergency room and there's blood on the floor. What's the likely outcome here? This kid's probably going to be ruined for years because his mom is the dean of the local victim university. The kid might eventually come back to dad, but this was a real breaking point where mom took control. Mom is a fierce victim, and it's going to have a horrifying effect on the kid. So why no privacy? Why insist on having access to your kids' phones, computers, well, everything, actually. In fact, kind of like they do in prison, occasionally tossing their cell, to use a prison term, to inspect their room is not a wrong thing to do. Why? What if the message that's being sent to your kid by phone is sexting? What if it's sexual pictures from other kids? What if it's where they're going to meet to buy drugs? What if, as happened in one school, the kids texted each other and established a suicide pact, and all 4 or 5 kids, can't remember, killed themselves by using their cell phones because no parent had control over or checked the phones? Kids don't just sit around one day and go, it'd be kind of fun if we just killed ourselves. Nobody does that. And if the parents are regularly checking the phones, they're going to know something's wrong. What if it's a threat to hurt somebody? In Alabama, which is the next state over from us, or in Georgia, we would say the next state down from us. Every state has a state that they make fun of. We make fun of Alabama. What's the only good thing to come out of Alabama in history? Interstate 20. In Alabama, there was a bunch of fourth graders, pay attention, fourth graders who conspired with their cell phones and writing to make a pact to kill their teacher. Not joking. Arranged to buy the duct tape, the knife, made all of the plans, and fortunately, like the morning of the planned murder, it was discovered and the 4 kids were carted off to jail, and then I lost track of what happened after that. I probably should have checked and found out. This was several years ago. For kids, there's no privacy and no real right of property. Parents can take whatever they want, which is one of the things that parents can use as consequences when they're in the process of training kids. Now, obviously, you want to give children as much privacy and right to property as they can handle, which is true, as is explained in the parenting book, with every choice. We want to give our children as many choices as possible. When my own children were old enough to understand the consequences of their choices, I let them make absolutely every choice I could possibly let go of, because I don't want to control everything that they're doing. And overall, they did pretty well. But there are certain things that kids just aren't ready for. 14 and 15-year-old kids aren't ready to manage whether they have sex with other 14 and 15-year-old kids. They're not old enough to manage certain kinds of information in the same way that you wouldn't allow your 18-month-old to decide for himself whether, drinking cleaning fluids under the sink would be a good thing or a bad thing. And this form of age restriction is seen everywhere. We make children go to school till they're 16. We don't allow them to get a license until they're a driver's license till they're 16, 17 in some states. Some states have actually proposed that we wait till they're 70. Every kid understands that under a certain age, some things simply are not appropriate, and privacy and property are 2 of them for pretty much all kids who live at home. Here's a mother who writes that her daughter, Hobbit, age 7, she says, loves finding real love principles in her storybooks. Her face just lights up when she recognizes something that is about unconditional love. She goes, that's real love. She said, last night we were reading a book called Pete the Cat and His Magic Sunglasses. I was unaware of this classic. Pete wakes up grumpy, nothing's going his way, so Grumpy Toad, who is never happy, comes along, but he's not grumpy that day because he's wearing these cool blue magic sunglasses. They help you see things in a new way, he says. So he gives them to Pete, who puts them on, and all of a sudden he notices that the birds are singing and the sky is bright, the sun is shining, and he says, I'm feeling all right. So he goes on to share his new glasses or his perspective with others as he goes along his day. Then the glasses break, and a wise owl reminds him that he doesn't need the sunglasses anymore. Just remember to look for the good in every day, the book says. So Pete learns that he's got the power to determine his own mood, kind of like find love, trust love, remember, and share it. And this is a 7-year-old kid. How cool is that? That story sounds suspiciously like a story I read when I was a kid called Dumbo the Elephant, but you'd have to be really old to know that story. This is from a woman who has been doing real love for like a couple of years. She said, a few years ago, my daughter was in a conversation by way of text with somebody about a difficulty that she was having. And her friend reassured her and said, it's going to be okay, because your mom has more love than any 2 parents I've ever seen. You're lucky to have her. Wow. This is the woman, the mother now, talking to me. She said, if only I'd known. For years, I was terrorized by the fear that a divorce would irreparably harm my child. I didn't know then that, quote, it's about the love, stupid, end quote, not the number of parents. Staying in the marriage would have killed me. So the choice was not hard in a sense. It's the fear that was hard. And real love helped me get out of the fear and the guilt and learn to love my daughter. And a sad commentary on what most kids experience. It makes me even more determined to spread this life-saving message that there's nothing more important than finding love and that it can be done. Just a cool letter from somebody who who remembered an experience from years ago. New subject. Here's somebody who says, I've been sitting here thinking about how our family has changed in the past year. We immersed ourselves in real love, even at times when it really wasn't easy. In fact, especially at those times. Our son was in jail, our daughter wasn't speaking to us, and our marriage wasn't all that great either. I just talked to my son, to give you one example. I have never seen him so happy and contented. Never. And he's been this happy for months. Our relationship used to be so tense, we could hardly breathe. And now this. I'm so grateful that I can't form the words to describe it. It's truly crazy, because I know you, the tension and the drama that you had in the past. And now, fun, happy, good lesson for all of us. Not to get caught up in the craziness of any given moment, because we can always take the steps, even though it may take a lot of steps, to get out of the craziness and make it all right. If I had told this woman when she was in the midst of her craziness years ago, oh, don't worry, everything will be all right, she would not have believed me. And now she looks back and can't believe how crazy it all was and that they stayed in it so long. It really does work, and it works consistently. I'm going to read you a really personal email exchange. In fact, so personal that I was going to read it last week, and I got to it and went, no. I decided not to read it today, too, but I'm going to anyway. Some of you will understand it, and others won't. Some will think it's just presumptuous or weird. Fine. I'll read it for the benefit of those who will understand it. And in a minute, you'll know which group you fall in. So you'll know that if you send me an email that says you don't like it, you were in the stupid group. A woman wrote to me. She said, I just read this on the Real Love Facebook page. You replied to somebody with this. She was talking to me. True power is the ability to choose to be loving and happy regardless of the circumstances. If we understand that sentence alone, now this is me, not her, we'd never be the same. We spend our lives finding false power to either feel strong or to protect ourselves. We spend our entire lives, our time, our energy, our lives we spend. We spend our lives like nickels and dollars for power that is an illusion. We trade our lives for nothing. We put ourselves in a prison that we make. It's insane, but we do it every day. Or we could gain true power. We could find love, trust it, remember it, share it, and flow with the power that runs the universe. Joyful and invincible. Why? Because we can choose to be happy all the time. There's nothing like it. I know from personal experience that this is true. I've seen it in the lives of a great many other people, so many that I have zero doubt of what I'm saying. Sure, I occasionally forget and get out of the flow. Who doesn't? Or sideways to it. And then I'm stupid and unloving and not happy. But then I can see what I'm doing and change my choices. Back to the writer. I want to be this person, she says. The person, when I said real power is being able to choose to be happy no matter what. I want to be this person who chooses that kind of power to be happy. But I also get to be okay when I'm not always this person. This is deep stuff. So listen slowly. Now, remember, I'm talking to her, so I'm just sharing with you my interchange with her. You have demonstrated that you're ready for the next level of growth. That's both exciting and challenging. I will challenge you more as we interact and as we correspond, because one, you need it, and two, you're ready for it. It's important that you have somebody you regard as a parent, a daddy. I kind of suck at being a mommy, but I can offer that. Trust me on this. You need more intimate tenderness. And you have tendency to avoid the use of the word daddy. You talk about parent figure. Not good enough. And why do you do it? To protect yourself from being betrayed and disappointed. But you need the intimacy of having a loving father. You need what I'm offering. I don't need it. You do. You also need to have a more intimate relationship with God. Why? Because, again, He's really your Father. It's not a metaphor. It's quite real. You've had amazing growth so far. I always knew that you had it in you, but you're doing even better than I would have guessed. And I don't foretell the future as a habit. She said, what you said about power is like real, authentic power in the moment. I just love it. Yeah, and you are the person I described who has this power. You can be this peaceful and happy and loving. And with that comes great power. She said, I can do this when I'm not in fear. I need to keep feeling topped up, full, so that the fear just can't get in. When I'm not paying attention, fear just barges right on in and I feel powerless to stop its force. I'll bet. I just wrote a blog that said, if you've never been loved, fear is not a choice. It's a reflex. If you have been loved, fear can still be a reflex, but now you can choose what happens next, in the very next moment. You are at that place. You're trusting enough that fear will sometimes barge in, reflex, but then you can choose to throw it out. Your willingness to learn, your faith is impressive, really. She said, is that all I need to keep getting loved and feeling it? Yeah, and in addition, remember it, just like we talk about here in the video chats every week. And more now, you need to practice sharing it with others. Love your son unfailingly. Never be angry or disappointed. Find somebody in your group or in a conference call to be a wise person for. It's indispensable practice for you to practice being loving. She said, I know that what I'm saying about fear and love may sound silly, and sometimes I just doubt it because it seems too simple. Oh, I went through this. I understand. I can still remember thinking, how could the secret to life be this simple? In fact, I thought if I write a book about this, everybody I know is going to laugh at me. But it is this simple. It's not always easy because the distractions of the world are so very loud. But the solution is simple. Try saying this out loud. I really love having a daddy who adores me, who loves me, who teaches me, who never leaves me. Less than an hour later, she emailed me. She said, I have a daddy who really loves me. Yeah, you really do. I really do. A lot. Just picturing you in my mind makes me smile from ear to ear. It's very vivid. You are so much more delightful than you ever suspected. All your life, so many people told you who you were, mostly with their behavior, and they were all so very wrong. But you didn't know that. So you took on as true what they told you. And that was tragic. She said, wow, it feels good to repeat what you just said about seeing you as my daddy and using the word daddy because of its tenderness and writing it out and saying it. And I never saw it until now that I was avoiding the word. Well, of course you didn't. Your parents, your mommy and daddy, promised to love you. And it was implied with your birth. And they told you they loved you with their words. And then with their behavior, your mommy and daddy betrayed you. So, of course you didn't like initially using those words. But now you're ready to get over it. You're just ready for the next step. You continue. And when I did use the word daddy, remember all the rest of you are listening to it. Intimate exchange. So this ain't about you. If you can learn something from it, great. If you don't, it wasn't directed at you. She said, when I did use the word daddy, it was like a bolt of lightning between the last time I wrote you and this time. And I realized instantly that I've been in great fear and not trusting that you could be my daddy and not leave me. I love being your daughter, and I love having a daddy. Woohoo. You will be surprised at how different you'll feel with this knowledge. You can't feel alone when you feel like this. She said, never once have you ignored me or made me feel like I didn't matter, and yet it has taken this email from you. You've had to be this direct with me in order for me to see this. And this is how we grow, one step at a time. Sometimes we have to be told what the next step is. Sometimes the next step is natural. You say, I'm both nervous and excited about being a wise person for somebody else, but I will trust you on this and ask a coach to give me somebody that I can be a wise person for. You can do this. Trust me, it will help you grow. And then she finally concludes, this journey just keeps on getting better. So why do I share that exchange with you? Because it is kind of personal, and it's not something I would say to everybody. It's between her and me. But she gives us a great example of what it's like to go from misery to happier to finally taking a step of trusting that she wouldn't have recognized on her own. We all need to learn to trust more and more. As wise people, we need to learn to help people to trust more, because it's in the trusting that we feel the love that gives us life. New subject. I know a woman who's been in real love for some time, and she thought her family was pretty normal. And now she sees what she was raised in, and she recognizes that it was a nightmare. She recently visited her parents, and she wrote this. I watched the unending, unloving interactions between my mom and my dad. It shouldn't be new to me or surprising, but I still am left feeling icky every time I see those two talk to each other. And tonight was no exception. Now, mind you, this is a lady who, when I first asked her, told me that her parents were unconditionally loving and super and mother and father and husband and wife of the year, of the decade. They've been telling you for all your life with their behavior that they're incapable of loving not just you, but anything. And now you're finally seeing it. Hence their treatment of each other and the other family members. Goal? What's a reasonable goal here? Certainly not to change them. The goal is to accept them as they are. They're going to simply stay like that. The odds that at their age they're going to change are very tiny. The likelihood of change is close to zero. But you can change. You can learn to love them. She concludes, so I'm writing because I feel sad and icky and just want somebody who loves me to tell me it'll be okay. Well, you will be okay. And that's what matters. And that changes everything else. You will be happy no matter what they do or what anybody else does, because you choose to feel loved, because you choose to love others. And that, as we talked about in the question before this one, or the two ago, that is real power. I got this from a woman who, when I first met her, had no self-esteem at all, just none. She lived with a man who has still, but who had then too, narcissistic personality disorder. She lived with him for 20 years. For those of you who wonder what a narcissistic personality disorder is, just picture somebody who is consummately, continuously, unremittingly selfish about everything, and who thinks about nothing except as it relates to himself. It crushed her, because narcissists just stick a great big straw in your head and suck out your soul. She learned about real love, and she did it. She just didn't just learn about it, she trusted. She learned to love, she found love, she trusted it. She kept doing it. She taught it to her daughter. Now she leads a group. She's taken huge leaps of faith in her life. I mean, crazy leaps. And she wrote and said this: I'm grateful for the pain in my life because it opens my heart. Pain is not to be avoided. This is me now. It makes us aware. She said, I'm grateful for the love which enables me to feel the pain. Now, this is brilliant, so I'm going to say it again. She said this: I'm grateful for the love which enables me to feel the pain. At first, that might just sound mysterious. Love enables us to feel pain, not just to react to it. Without love, all we do is react to pain. We don't really stop and feel it at all. But when we feel loved, we're not afraid of pain anymore. Now we can feel it and learn from it the information that it can give us. She said, feeling pain while I'm loved heals me, strengthens me, gives me hope. Feeling love with no pain, in fact, doesn't teach us much at all. It is transforming, on the other hand, to feel love, heal the wounds that cause our pain. It teaches us essentially that we're invincible. She said, I gave up on myself a long time ago. Sort of. Everybody else in your life gave up on you, so you saw no choice but to give up. But something deep inside you didn't give up completely, because I've seen people who've given up completely. A lot of them. You ain't one of them. You continue. Love did not exist in my life. I was just waiting to die. And that, my dear, is a beautiful description of life without love. It's just waiting to die, waiting for our lives to end. But now I have people who really love me. And who knows what can happen now? Pretty much anything, huh? Really, people who feel unconditionally loved in their lives and learn to love other people tend to become poetic in their expressions of love, as several people have just in this one video chat. I couldn't make this stuff up. A year ago, I know a girl who was suicidal. I met her a year ago, and in an institution. She was a cutter, and I say cutter just as a short version of saying she was somebody who self-mutilated by cutting herself. Cutter's not meant to be a demeaning term or to diminish the seriousness of the problem. She was a suicide risk, had attempted to kill herself several times. Cutters, by the way, rarely die because of the cuts they inflict. They die from overdoses, hangings, that kind of thing. And she was in an institution where they were going to keep her for, the prognosis was 7 to 10 years on antipsychotic drugs. This is just a teenage kid. So the parents brought her here for an intervention, which was some kind of guts for two parents to tell all the mental health professionals that they were going to discharge her. One parent was angry and controlling, and the other was permissive and entitling, which was very confusing to the kid, which was one of the reasons that she was a cutter. She was confused about everything in life. We started over. We just started over with loving and teaching. I started over with just loving and teaching the girl, and then started over with the parents by teaching them to love and teach, which they had never had experience with in their lives. Neither one of them had ever been unconditionally loved. Neither one of them had ever been taught life as a subject. We all get taught algebra and history and sociology and whatever, but we don't ever get taught life. These two hadn't been. Her parents became pretty cooperative, but the girl fought to go back to the institution. After she left from her intervention here, the parents were much kinder to her. You would think that a kid would go, wow, now I have these two unconditionally loving parents. How cool is this? But you got to remember, this is a kid who's a teenage kid who has never seen unconditional love in her life. And so she had no place, no shelf in her head to put it on. It didn't even register for her. So she fought to go back to an institution with bars and gates. Why? Because it was a perfect place for her. There was no school, no responsibility. She met with groups of fellow victims. Victimhood was celebrated as a virtual religion. I've been in such institutions, both as a patient and as a physician. They're taught the language of victimhood. They come to identify themselves, their identity as victims. So she fought everything that her parents tried. She made things tough when she went home. I mean, she would hyperventilate and she would throw up and she would cut herself. And her parents called, and her dad called and said, she's in the next room and she's hyperventilating and crying and says she wants to go back home, meaning to the institution. That's how comfortable people get in institutions. And she's holding a knife to her wrist. What do we do? Well, you can imagine how freaked out they were. They thought that she was going to kill herself right there in front of them. And I said, I gave him some instructions, and so he went back with her, and he just, calm as a summer's breeze, said, would you like to follow me and see what I'm going to do? Now, mind you, she's screaming and yelling and hyperventilating. He didn't fall into the trap of the victim game that she was playing because I'd helped prepare him for that. So he said, would you like to come and see what I'm going to do? And he was holding tools in his hand. Well, she'd never seen this response to hyperventilating and throwing up and screaming and having a tantrum before. So he just walked down the hallway to her bedroom. And she waited for 10 seconds and stood up and followed him down the hall. And he took his tools and he just carefully took the hinges off of her bedroom door and took her bedroom door out into the garage and locked it up in the garage. And she got really quiet. She said, why did you take away my door? And he said, because we don't behave like that in our house. We don't behave like victims. When there's something that we want or something we don't like, we talk about it. She got really quiet because he didn't play the victim game. Victims play games with people. Why? Because they work. Because the games work. And in the institution, it worked. All these kids had to do was throw a fit and they'd get what they wanted. She listened. And the parents taught the kid. The parents provided the child with gravity. The parents provided the child with order in a universe of chaos. They became parents. And now the kid goes to a normal school and isn't cutting and isn't throwing up and isn't doing all these things. And that was within a matter of months as opposed to 7 to 10 years on antipsychotic drugs. Real love's a pretty powerful treatment. So here it cured somebody who had been diagnosed as severely mentally ill. In order to be on antipsychotics, you don't have just, kind of like a little crying jag. We talked about somebody who was cured of Crohn's disease. Stress has terrible effects on our minds and on our bodies. The only cure for stress I've ever known, another name for stress is just fear, is love. I know a woman whose husband was never taught how to be in relationships, and as a result, is often afraid at work and at home. And I'm helping his wife see how she can be more supportive of her husband. She wrote to say that things were going well. And I said, keep it up. You have the power to be a great leader in your family. Now, he's a really smart guy. He has a powerful job, but he was afraid all the time. She was the one who needed to give him the power to not be afraid. Nobody had ever helped him with that before. So I assured her, you have the power to be a great leader in your family. You can do it. You've already proven it. She said, I'm just trying to figure out the balance of being a leader, but not overstepping into his territory. It's less about figuring, because she said I'm trying to figure out the balance, than it is simply being aware of how you feel. As soon as people in real love start talking about walking a tightrope or being careful or there's a fine line, no, too much thinking going on. Just be aware of how you feel. If you feel controlling or irritated, you're not being a leader. You're not being loving. It's about the feeling, not figuring the balance. And she did. She got the feeling, and she's becoming a leader in her family. On the whole, we need to be very slow to modify our partners, but sometimes they need help seeing their fears, and that's what she helped him identify. And as she loved him while she was afraid, he became stronger and less afraid. New subject. I went to a dinner with some friends, and suddenly I became, this is an email from somebody who said, I went to dinner with some friends and suddenly I became acutely aware of, I don't think I've had anybody begin a letter this way, I became acutely aware of what a sweet person I am. And she said, does that sound like a strange thing to say? No, it really doesn't. It sounds like you're finally waking up. People studying real love often make a mistake when they say that telling the truth about ourselves means talking only about our mistakes. And yes, that's often the most neglected truth. We tend to hide our mistakes so that we can't feel seen or loved until we do talk about them. True. But we also need to see our other qualities, the rest of us, all of who we are. When we're afraid, which for most of us is nearly all the time, we don't see our gifts, our beautiful qualities, and we need to know those. Why? Because it's encouraging to know what our good qualities are. It enables us to know where to put our efforts. Recently, I talked to a woman who was frightened to her bones. I mean, she just walked in and just shook from head to toe. And one of the first things I told her was that one of her innate qualities, not something I was going to teach her to be, something we might polish, but something she already was brave. She looked at me like, oh man, I've come all this way to Rome to visit with a stupid person. She was very surprised. But it was in there. I could see that she had an innate bravery, and in time she really developed that quality, in part because somebody helped her to see it. This woman continues. She said, when I came to Rome for my intervention, you said that I have a sweetness that most people miss. Oh, I remember that. You continue. I'm really noticing that quality now more and more, and it's been, a year since you told me. And the good news is that I can see how sweet I am, and the fact that other people almost always miss it. And that doesn't make me any less sweet. Finally, hooray. There's quite a power that comes from knowing who you are, and all your life, nobody's ever told you about this quality. So you didn't believe it. And you didn't develop it because you didn't know you had it. Once you know who you are, you're not blown around by every little wisp of wind. You're not devastated by mistakes or other people's opinions. No matter what happens, you know who you are. It's like finally having a foundation. You continue. Many years ago, I knew a kind old man who's now dead. He told me that I had an angel-like quality. I'll never forget it because for a minute, it was like he totally saw me the way that you see me all the time. It didn't sink in very deeply because it was the first time anybody had ever said that to me. And there was nobody else that ever said it again until you, many years later. But now that I believe it, it feels very real and beautiful, despite being overlooked by most. It's fun to finally know this. I'll bet it is. And I'm really happy that you do finally see it. She concludes, my parents can't seem to see it. Other people can't seem to see it, but that's okay. I do. And it makes me feel happier and stronger. Bless your heart. The people around you simply were never taught how to see such qualities. Instead, they were taught to see things like grades, accomplishment, competence, outward beauty, success, the things that don't necessarily make us happy and in fact often interfere with our happiness. New subject, a woman wrote. She said, I asked my husband to be more attentive toward me. Nothing happened, and now I'm irritated. There are few words that we use with our partners that are worse than more. Could you be more helpful? Could you be a better person? Could you be wiser? Could you be more? Why? Because the request is endless. It has no end point, and it's not specific. It just kind of hangs over your head like the more sword. If you get it right, briefly, then people still want more. If you don't get it right, then you're criticized. It's awful. Could you be more? If you want something, be specific. So I gave her some examples of some specific things. So the next day, she went and she asked him to lie down with her and just hold her for a few minutes. And she warned him, this was at like 5:30. And she said, at 7 o'clock, would you come with me to the bedroom and just lie down with me and just hold me for a few minutes? Well, now see, that's the kind of thing that a guy can handle. You know, screw in that bolt, you know, until you get to 40 pounds of torque. We can handle that. It was specific and clear. She gave him the time and what she wanted. So at 7 o'clock, he went in with her and he laid down next to her and he held her for a few minutes. And he liked it. And from then on, she asked him very specific requests and she got what she wanted. Whereas before, all she ever got was frustration out of asking for more. In asking, however, even when you're specific, you have to be prepared to hear no, or you'll be revealed as a fraud. If you're not prepared to hear no, then you're not really making a request, you're making a demand. And no matter how you couch your words, people kind of sense that you're making a demand and they don't like it. So you've kind of heard the same theme that we talk about over and over again. We all need love. We need people to find it from, and you've heard examples from quite a few people here who wrote in to describe how they found it and how they then trusted it, how they learned to remember it, and then how they learn to share it with the people around them. And then they report the universally happy and powerful results that follow. And we can experience them too. See you in a week.